Good evening and welcome to another edition of Newsmaker Live with me, Kendall Burton. Tonight we want to focus on the police and last night's address to the nation by the Prime Minister, Honorable Dr. Kenny Anthony, announcing that the United States has now decided to suspend all assistance to the Royal St. Lucia Police Force. Previously, the government had said that the United States was barring local officers from taking part in training programs arranged or financed by the United States government. The U.S. action is linked to several controversial police killings dating back to 2011, when 12 suspected criminals were killed in confrontations with lawmen. At the height of the killings, one of the voices that was raised in protest was the voice of my guest tonight, attorney and coordinator of the National Center for Legal Aid and Human Rights Incorporated, Ms. Mary Francis. Welcome to Newsmaker Live.
Thank you, Kendall, for having me on tonight. And while the circumstances which brought me here are not very happy circumstances, however, I think I'm happy to be here, especially in terms of the work which has been going on at the National Center for Legal Aid and Human Rights in the pursuit of ensuring that we have a human rights culture in St. Lucia. So thank you, and good evening to the viewers.
Okay, we appreciate you taking the time to be with us this evening. First of all, we know that you have come under a lot of fire over the years, especially from the public, for raising concerns about the police killings. First of all, do you feel a sense of vindication? Do you get the urge to say, I told you so?
Well, in one sense, I would say so, but the whole episode, the whole incident, the circumstances, I'm still not happy. So whilst yes, maybe there's a sense of vindication in terms of the what was being said, that the international community would be having eyes on St. Lucia, and that all was not well, and the calls that were made were being ignored, and I faced a lot of jeering sometimes and so forth. So yes, from that sense, that point of view, I would say so. But I'm not happy about the circumstances and generally the justice system in St. Lucia.
As I said at the beginning, we're going to focus a lot on the Prime Minister's speech last night. Let's listen to what the Prime Minister said last night as he described the police slayings as occurring under not his watch, but that of the then United Workers' Party government headed by Stephenson King. Under the UWP government, the police launched Operation Restore Confidence as a violent crime threatened to engulf the country. Let's take a listen to what the Prime Minister had to say last night.
This operation commenced with a dramatic speech to the nation by the former Prime Minister, the Honorable Stephenson King, on May 30th, 2010. The former Prime Minister warned criminals that, quote, "There will be no refuge. No stone will be left unturned, and there will be no hiding place for anyone." In a further address to the nation on February 13, 2011, the former Prime Minister issued another warning to the criminals. He told them that, quote, "They will be hunted down, they will be found, they will be prosecuted, they will be judged, and will be made to pay the consequences for the crimes committed against our peace-loving and abiding people," unquote. Many would recall that there was in circulation a hit list of targeted persons deemed to be criminals. I recall that in opposition I had seen such a list.
Let me ask you, do you get the impression from Dr. Anthony's comments in that clip that we just saw that he was at least suggesting that the former Prime Minister Stephenson King was somehow authorizing the crackdown on crime by the police?
Well, he seemed to be laying the foundation for arriving at that conclusion, or for laying blame. And it's not about laying blame, it's about taking responsibility and doing what is right. I mean, it happened there, it began under the last regime, and as I said, the Labour Party was in opposition. They were among those who were silent. I never heard any denouncing of what was taking place. I never heard anything from them. And in any case, they assumed office, and in 2011. So now the matter has to be dealt with, and should have been dealt with swifter, and it should not be allowed to come to this situation whereby, because of pressure from an outside force, the United States, that he's going to respond, whereas locally there was concern, there was disquiet and so forth. I mean, a blind eye was turned to the voices locally, and now because of pressure, I think I feel a bit ashamed. It's because of the pressure from outside that some level of responding is being done right now. I mean to say, it's a question about people now, they too frequently like to focus more on the messenger than the message, you know. So the question of trying to lay the foundation and say it began under the last Prime Minister, and politicians behave like that, they behave like that. Why did they remain silent as the opposition party and never said anything, you know? So I'm just dismiss the whole thing.
Now, if I refer to his speech last night, one of the things that he said was that once Operation Restore Confidence was started, some people supported it very openly, very vocally, others remained silent. If he alluded to having seen a hit list and remained silent himself, do you see it as a tacit endorsement of what was happening?
Indeed, I would say so. That's what I'm trying to suggest. If it was wrong, then, I mean, as the opposition, persons have been killed. He said he saw the hit list like myself and other people, and not one word, we never heard any denouncement by the Labour Party, who was trying to replace the United Workers' Party. So apparently there was some mutual benefiting from what was going on at the time, you know. And I mean, they have been in office for a little while, and we have not heard, we have not seen that inquiry or that level of seriousness in trying to get at the bottom of the whole thing. So although there is some hush-hush, some benefiting from being remaining quiet, I don't understand why it took so long, I mean, for us to get a response, and no inquiry has been held. I can recall letters have been written by myself as the coordinator of the center, requesting that an inquiry be held because of the rumors and the speculation and the visa revocation, and for the security of the country, that should be done. As a matter of fact, we heard the Home Affairs Minister last year announce disbanding of the task force. The reason he stated publicly, there was no accountability during the so-called Operation Restore Confidence. So at that point, he should have continued and then go and have some inquiry as to what happened in terms of those men that just lost their lives, you know, and that was not done. And that is where my disappointment really lies.
Okay, here's something else that the Prime Minister had to say in his speech last night. I'm quoting him. "We now reap the harvest of rash decisions, particularly by policymakers anxious to gain quick resolutions." What do you make of that statement?
Oh, well, to whom is he referring? Who is he referring to? I mean, they are also belong to the class of politicians. So, I mean, the same could be said of them if he's implying, I mean to say, the last regime. The same can be said. It's a different regime, a different party, but we have to ask the question, when is the different really the same? You know, so.
Dr. Anthony referred to the Leahy law, which prompted the U.S. action. He suggests that was being applied to St. Lucia, which now puts us, in essence, in the same bracket as countries like Turkey, Pakistan, and so forth. Let's listen to what Dr. Anthony said as we take in our second clip, and then we'll come back to get your reaction.
Essentially, this law says that the United States shall not furnish any assistance, quote, to any unit of the security forces of a foreign country if the Secretary of State has credible information that such unit has committed a gross violation of human rights, unquote. The law further states that the prohibition just mentioned, quote, shall not apply if the Secretary of State determines and reports that the government of such country is taking effective steps to bring the responsible members of the security unit to justice.
Now, some have suggested that the United States is being very selective in the imposition of sanctions. Look at the situation in Egypt, for example, where all kinds of atrocities have been occurring, allegedly, and yet the U.S. administration has not, at least up to now, cut off billions of dollars of military aid to Egypt. What does that say to you?
Well, we all know the inconsistencies that usually U.S. foreign policy is full of inconsistencies, and they always follow their interests, and the action is actually the actions that they take is because in pursuit of their interests, and that is why I said it's a happy situation for me, because knowing the record of the U.S., knowing how they have actually sometimes turned a blind eye to corrupt regimes and so forth when it suits them, and for us now to be at the receiving end like that, that is where I feel very, very uncomfortable about the whole thing. It is said that those who pay the piper call the tune, and if we are receiving assistance from them, our police force receiving training, I mean, definitely they cannot be pumping their money into an institution which seem not to be complying with the law. So that is understandable, and we know that there is inconsistency. As I said, look at Syria and look at probably they're dealing with China where you have human rights abuses and so forth, but that is American foreign policy. America never follows the law. America is a law unto itself when it comes to the international relations and the world and so forth, and that's the way it is, you know.
But do you really think it's in their best interest? Because, I mean, they were not granting the aid or support to the Royal St. Lucia Police Force or to St. Lucia for purely altruistic reasons. The U.S. have shut down their borders to the drug dealers, who have now been forced to find alternative routes, the Caribbean being a natural and easy route to go through. So is it really in their interest, you think, to take the steps that they've taken?
In the interest of
the United States?
U.S.?
Yes.
I mean, that is, to me, that would be of insignificant importance to a certain extent for the U.S. when it's said in their interest. I mean, to see they're in control of the situation. Simply that they're, I suppose, playing the big stick policy. You know, the question of helping the Caribbean to secure borders would be helping America in their fight against the war on illicit drugs and so forth. But how much benefit can America get by putting this probably sanction on us and withdrawing aid for the time being? That cannot make any cause any big problem to them, because the region is supportive. The region has this relationship with America when it comes to the whole question of drug interdiction and so on. And you have the region as a whole, they actually playing the role that it's supposed to play. And I don't think the America, that would mean so much to America. It's simply just wanting to know that St. Lucia, really, in terms of the police, they fall in line, and they should not tolerate any human rights abuses when it comes to the whole question of the deaths that took place and so forth. There is a role for them to play. I'm just saying it is sad that we ourselves ought not to have allowed that to happen. Right. Because we should have taken steps when it was happening in 2011. There were enough voices calling. Never mind those voices may have been in the minority. Never mind that they were associating the voices with being enemies of the police and supportive of criminals. Far from that, we were standing for the rule of law. We were actually pointing out to the commissioner then and the government of the day that this type of behavior would not be in the interest of St. Lucia in the long run. But even the commissioner went on record, and he had his meeting with his men, and he said that Mary Francis, don't mind the Mary Francises of the world. And he said the majority of St. Lucians are supporting the police. I mean to say, when I heard, I said, but this is mob rule, and look at the consequences today. Even though the majority are supporting you in what is wrong, I mean to say, look at the consequences today. So I think they had sufficient warning. They should have seen that those things were not right. You have the question of a human rights culture now in the world, international human rights standards of what have been sought after, and they should have taken steps to, in the first place, never introduce this crime fighting strategy about just liquidating people. And after you liquidate them, it takes months before you could bring it before the inquest, which the law provides for. It took almost a whole year before those files could have reached the DPP's office. Why? Apparently they wanted to shove everything underneath the carpet, you know, and they could not have been bothered. There is a menacing, a problem of crime menacing the country, therefore we will deal with it. And then they dealt with it, and as though that was that.
Okay, we're going to take our first break right now. When we come back, we can talk about some of those consequences that you alluded to. You're watching Newsmaker Live on DBS. I'm Kendall Burton. I'm sitting with Mary Francis. We'll be right back.